In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at new shrubs for 2024. Hi, I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings, and this year we are so excited to be adding around 30 new proven winter shrubs to our online catalog at gardencrossings.com. We're excited to take a look at these various shrubs. They've got great foliage interest as well as so many beautiful new blooms. So let's dig in and take a closer look. The first shrub we're going to take a look at, it's an abelia. It's called Poco Loco. It's hardy in zones 6 to 9, and it gets about 2 to 3 foot tall and 2 to 3 foot wide. It likes to be grown in full sun to part shade locations, and the flowers, they come off of the new season's growth. So really, it's one of those plants, if you trim it in the fall or trim it in the early spring, you don't have to worry about trimming it necessarily at the wrong time if you're trimming them in those seasons. And who doesn't love a shrub with multi-seasons of interest? Poco Loco, it has spring foliage that comes out in shades of yellow and orange. And the new growth, it's a beautiful green with kind of a really vibrant pinkish red tip. In the summer, Poco Loco has beautiful pink bell-shaped flowers that the pollinators are going to love. It's got a nice mounding habit with semi-evergreen foliage. And another thing that's really nice about abelia is it is a deer-resistant shrub variety. Next on the list, we're going to talk about a boxwood, and this new boxwood is called Neat Ball. Not meat, but neat ball. It's hardy in zones 4 to 9, and it gets about 2 to 3 foot tall and wide, creating a beautiful mounding type habit. It likes to be grown in full sun to full shade areas. And with so many boxwood on the market, what makes this one here so special? Well, many of you may be familiar with a well-known variety called green velvet. This is an improved version of green velvet. It keeps its deep green foliage throughout the winter without bronzing that sometimes you'll notice on boxwood. It's got a beautiful dense habit and it's deer resistant. If you're looking for something that's evergreen, creates like a nice border, a nice hedge. Even boxwood, they're nice to be planted in containers if you're just looking for kind of that nice, just imagine a beautiful tall upright container with a nice globed evergreen. Really beautiful for entryways and such. If you do feel that pruning does need to be done on your boxwood, we recommend doing so in late spring to early summer, just after the new growth has started. It's best to avoid cutting into the woody areas because sometimes then your shrub just may not look good. So wait for that new growth to emerge, and if shaping needs to be done, do it at that time. Like I was saying, it's a great formal plant for walkways, borders, even creating, if you want to create like an edge around your garden, kind of frame it in, box it in, boxwood are a great option for doing just that. For those of you in the South, we've got a beautiful addition called Just Chill Double Mauve Chamelia. This is hardy in zones 7 to 9, although some of us here in the North that are maybe like a zone 6B, we may be able to overwinter these with some protection. It gets about 5 to 8 foot tall and about 3 to 5 foot wide. So a nice columnar shaped shrub that likes to be grown in full sun to part shade areas. Chamelia does bloom on the new growth, so if you feel that you need to do any trimming on this plant, it's best to do it late winter or early spring. So many shrubs bloom in the summer that this is a great refreshing, just kind of rejuvenation of the garden in this fall that's adding these beautiful pink blooms. Also, it's got nice, thick, dark green foliage that really is complementary with those blooms. Chamelia grows best in moist, well-drained locations. It does prefer more of an acidic soil, and it doesn't really hurt and recommended actually to lay just a nice little thin layer of mulch that will help hold some of that moisture in. Another nice thing with the Chamelia is they're a deer-resistant shrub. Next on the list is a cornice, also known as dogwood. This particular variety that's new for 2024 is called Sergeant Pepper. So I know I've talked a lot about boxwood and how I just love them for their winter interest because they've got those beautiful red twigs. But this Sergeant Pepper not only has those beautiful red twigs for the winter, it's got year-round interest. It's hardy down to zone 3, So those of you in the north, this one might be for you. So zones 3 to 7, and it gets about 4 to 6 foot tall and about 6 to 8 foot wide. It likes to be grown in full sun to part shade locations. The nice thing with this plant is it's got beautiful ever-changing interest. So the new foliage in the spring, it comes out white and green, and then it's got some beautiful pink tones on it. In the late spring, you'll see these nice clusters of white flower. And then late summer, those white margins, they turn bright pink. So it's got great fall foliage color. And like I mentioned, in the winter, those deep red stems are so beautiful, especially if you're in an area like we are here in Michigan, that you get the snow. Those red stems really pop in the white of the snow. It likes to be planted in moist soil, but it can handle some drought or dryness once it is established. We do recommend with dogwood that you trim it by about 1/3 every 1 to 2 years. And the reason why you need to trim, you don't need to trim, but the reason why we recommend it is because if you trim, that's going to create new growth, and to keep those red twigs the most vibrant they can be, the new growth is going to give them the beautiful red that you might be looking for. Another nice thing with dogwood is if you're like me and like to do winter porch pots, you cut some twigs out and it's a beautiful thriller for those winter porch pot containers. Next on the list is Yuki Kabuki Dsia. Talk about names, wow. So I'm not sure, maybe some of you know what Yuki Kabuki is. It just might be me who has no clue, and you're all going, come on Heidi, you know what that is. But I don't, I'm just gonna be honest. So Yuki Kabuki Dsia. So I've always loved the look of Dsia. Usually they're kind of more of a compact, low growing shrub. Nice mounding habit, but this particular one, it gets just a little taller. So this is hardy in zones 5 to 8, and it gets about 2 to 4 foot tall and wide, creating a nice mounding habit. Now, some of you may be wondering, okay, Heidi, you're saying like 2 to 4, or when I'm describing the height and the width of these plants, you're going to have a little bit of variation there based on where you live. So those of you in the warmer climates, you might find that your shrub gets bigger faster, where those of us in the cooler climates, ours might not get big as fast. So that's where you're seeing, and also to the age of the plant, of course. So Dsia likes to be planted in full sun to part shade locations, and it does bloom on the previous season's growth. So Yuki Kabuki was bred for a more rounder, bushier habit than cherry blossom. If you're familiar with the cherry blossom Dsia we carried, it has a larger presence in the landscape. In the spring, masses, and I mean masses, of dainty pink flowers emerge. And I shouldn't even say flowers yet. Dainty pink flower buds emerge, and they're edged in white. And as those buds pop open, they reveal a beautiful white star-shaped flower. It's got glossy green foliage, and it really does put on a show in the fall. It's got shades of yellow and purple and red. So not only do you have those beautiful spring blooms, you're going to get nice fall foliage as well. Dsia does prefer to be planted in moist, well-drained soil, but it can tolerate drought once it is established. What would be a new plant or a new shrub talk without having hydrangeas in it? I feel like every year there are new and great hydrangeas that are introduced, and 2024 is no exception. This year, we're introducing the Weebit Innocent Hydrangea. So you may have heard of Weebit Giddy and Weebit Grumpy. They're very bold, vibrant colors. Weebit Innocent is a nice, just a soft, subtle pink or blue, depending on the pH of your soil. Weebit Innocent is hardy in zones 5 to 9, and it gets about 2 to 3 foot tall and round, so just creates kind of a nice compact habit. It likes to be planted in sun or part shade locations. For those of you in the south, I would say probably morning sun would be the most sun that you'd want this plant to get. Otherwise, you may find that you're needing to water it frequently, which isn't a problem. It can handle, and it likes to be watered frequently. But so you feel like you're not constantly dragging the hose. For the south, I would recommend more of that part shade, early sun type of location. Weebit Innocent is a reblooming hydrangea, so it blooms off of the old growth or the previous season's growth early on in the season, and then it will rebloom on the new growth later on. It's got beautiful double florets, so that means there's multi-petals on the flowers. And like I mentioned, it's a nice soft range of colors, light pink to a soft baby blue, depending on the pH of your soil. Numerous flowers appear early summer, and like I said, it reblooms later on in the season. With these big leaf hydrangeas, we recommend only trimming them as needed, because there's really not a good time to trim them, because if you trim them in the fall, you could be trimming off the buds that are already set for the next season's growth, or if you trim them in the spring, you certainly will be trimming off those buds that have already been set. But I do understand that sometimes at some points hydrangeas, they may just feel too big for your space and you need to trim them. So I always tell people, sometimes you do need to trim. You're going to sacrifice those blooms, but to get that plant back down to the size that you're wanting it to be, you're going to have to do some trimming. And from my experience here, we're in a zone 6. I would recommend trimming them in the fall, especially if you're at the northern end of the zones, because sometimes those buds don't overwinter anyway because it just gets too cold for them. So sacrificing that first round of blooms, if I had to sacrifice, that would be what I would do. That way I know I'll have the mid to later summer flowers. Also, Weebit Innocent makes a great and really very beautiful cut flower. Next on the list is a mock orange or Philadelphus. It's called Illuminati Spice. So it's an improved version of Illuminati Arch, if you're familiar with that variety that we've carried in years past. It's hardy in zones 4 to 7. It gets about 4 foot tall and 4 foot wide, and it likes to be planted in sun to part shade areas. We do find though that it flowers best and the fragrance is most prolific if you have it planted in a sunny area. So the more sun, the more flowers, and the more fragrance you're going to get. And that fragrance, it's got a beautiful citrusy orange fragrance, so that's kind of the fragrance that I'm talking about. It features large double white blooms early in the summer. It's just, I think it's one of those plants, many of you have heard of mock oranges, but I'm sure there's many of you that haven't neither. So it's a unique, different look to add to the landscape or the garden. It also is a lot more prolific than what the Illuminati Arch ever was. And a prolific bloomer, that's what you want. You want a plant that's going to give you lots of flowers, that gives you lots of enjoyment. Happy Face Orange Potentilla is the next on our list. And there's Happy Face white and pink and yellow. But I have never seen a orange potentilla before this point. So it's one of the most versatile, heat-loving yet cold-hardy shrubs I think that we offer. And you see potentilla kind of all over the place. A lot of yellow. So this orange I think is going to be a nice addition to those who love potentillas. It's hardy in zones 2 to 7. It gets about 1 to 3 foot tall and 2 to 3 foot wide. So there we go again. Is it 1 foot or 3 foot? Because I understand that's a drastically different location you might be planting it in. So a mature plant will be more around that 2 to 3 foot. But in its early years, like the first or second year, you might find that it's only about 1 foot tall. It likes to be planted in full sun to part shade locations, and it features beautiful peachy orange, kind of tiny little flowers that just cover that plant all summer long. In the cooler temperatures, you might notice that the blooms tend to be a little bit more of that vibrant orange color, where once it starts getting hot in the summer, you'll notice they'll be a little bit more faded, more of a peachy color. So don't worry if they're not orangey orange in the heat of the summer. That is kind of the nature of this plant. It's a native shrub that's salt tolerant, and it's another great deer resistant option. It's adaptable to most soil locations, except for I wouldn't really plant it in a moist or wet area. It's not gonna like that. It does bloom on the new growth, and we do recommend trimming it by about 1/3 every year or two, and that's just to kind of give the plant a rejuvenated look and feel. One thing to note, I did mention that the flowers in the heat of the summer tend to be a little bit more peachy. Depending how hot it gets, we do also notice that sometimes the flowers do slow down in the extreme heat of the summer. So again, just another little note that if you're like it's really hot and my plant's just not putting out the flowers it was when it was cooler, that is something that we have seen and do expect with this particular plant. Next, we're talking roses. So I know there's a lot of you out there who love roses, and this is a newer series for us. It's the Flavorette series. This one is called Flavorette Paired. We know that gardeners like to incorporate their gardens into what they eat. So this is where the Flavorette series comes into play. It's hardy in zones 4 to 9. It gets about 3 to 4 foot tall and wide, creating a nice mounding type habit. It likes to be grown in full sun, and it blooms off of the new growth. So if you feel like you need to trim it in the fall or early spring, you can do so. The Flavorette series is a series of edible roses. Paired has a light taste, and I've been told, I haven't tried one myself yet, but I've been told that it's got just a really light, ripe pear flavor to it. It has beautiful white blooms with just a soft hint of pink. It is a reblooming rose, so it should bloom all summer for you. And it is also disease resistant. And that is one thing that Proven Winners has done with their rose series, is they've taken the roses that are the most disease resistant, because nobody likes to deal with diseases on their roses. Black spot or mildew are the two that come to mind. What can you use these Flavorette Paired petals on? Well, you can use them on cakes, use them on salads. You can even make flavored sugar using these petals. There's just, the possibilities are endless with what you can do with the Flavorette Paired rose. Back to the southern gardeners. I know a lot of what I'm talking about here is more for the north, but I'm not leaving you out of this presentation. And the plant we're going to talk about is Chicklet Gold Tacoma, or trumpet bush. And I know I just said that, you know, for the south, we're not leaving you out, but those in the north, this is something for you as well. We'll just be using it kind of in a different scenario. So it's hardy in zones 8 to 11. It gets about 3 to 6 foot tall and 3 foot wide. So again, in the south, it can easily reach 6 foot, but for those of us in the north, probably more like 2 to 3 foot, because we're going to only be able to enjoy it for the immediate growing season that we're in. It likes to be grown in full sun locations, and it does bloom on the new growth. So it brings the beauty of a trumpet vine, if you're familiar with a trumpet vine, into more of a compact, long blooming bush. So you don't have to worry about the invasiveness that sometimes comes with trumpet vines. This is a non-invasive shrub or bush. It's deer resistant, and it's got an abundance of fragrant yellow tubular flowers. If yellow isn't your color, there's also one, or gold. If gold or yellow is not your color, there's also an orange that was introduced last year. Pair them together for kind of a great, you know, duo that really would complement each other in the garden. And if you are somebody that loves to watch the hummingbirds come to your garden, anything tubular or trumpet shaped is something that those hummingbirds are going to love. And Chicklet Gold is no exception. And last on the list, and this one here, man, when I was walking through the trial gardens last summer, I could see from a distance something that just looked amazing. At the time, I couldn't tell exactly what it was until I got closer, but upon closer inspection, it was a Weigela Sonic Bloom Punch. When I was in the trial garden, this plant was absolutely covered with flowers on it. Like, I could hardly see any foliage. That's just how many flowers there were. So hardy in zones 4 to 8. It's about 2 to 4 foot tall and 2 to 4 foot wide. When I did see it in the trial garden, it was a fairly young, maybe a year or two old plant, and it was about 2 foot tall and 2 foot wide. So it has time yet that it's going to mature and get taller. One thing to point out with the Sonic Bloom series of Weigela is that is a re-blooming series. So you're not only going to get to enjoy those flowers in the spring, you're going to get to enjoy them all summer long. So the Sonic Bloom we've carried in the past, some of the other varieties, they've bloomed up to 3 cycles of flowers, and we're talking prolific cycles of flowers throughout the summer. This Weigela blooms on old and new growth. So the first cycle of flowers is going to come more from the previous season's bloom, and then the new flowers will come from the new growth that emerges. It's got, like I said, hot pink, and we're talking hot, hot pink tubular flowers that those hummingbirds, again, are going to love. The foliage is kind of a bronzy green. So a lot of these Sonic Bloom Weigelias have the green foliage. So they're starting to kind of transition a little bit to more that darker foliage. So the bronzy green is really beautiful and complementary to those tubular blooms. And if trimming is needed, which you may or may not need trimming, but if it is needed, we recommend giving it a light trim after that first cycle of blooms in the spring. And then, like I said, it's gonna flush out and put more blooms on throughout the summer. And another nice thing with Weigela is it's deer resistant. So we always, not every plant can we talk about is deer resistant, but if something is deer resistant, it's definitely worth talking about, because listening to, the comments and such people make, deer pressure is a real and a big thing in all areas of the country. So with so many great new shrub varieties, which ones could you see in your garden or landscape? I know there's definitely a few on this list that will be making a home in either my home garden or out at the greenhouse in the trial gardens, because there's so many beautiful new things to take a look at. If you're new to our station, we invite you to subscribe. And as always, if you have any questions or comments on anything we've talked about today, feel free to leave a comment below. You can head to our website, gardencrossings.com, where you'll be able to find all of today's varieties, and we can ship them directly to your door. Or if you're in the area of Zeeland, Michigan, you can stop into our garden center this spring or summer. Thanks for watching. I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings.